Okay, we can start. Okay, first we do the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. And today is July 18th, 2015. And today we'll be discussing Sutta number 135 in the Majjhima Nikāya. This is called the Cūḻakammavibhanga Sutta, which means the shorter discourse on the analysis of karma. Okay, and this sutta begins on page 1053. Okay, and so this sutta begins when the Buddha is living in Jeta's grove in Savatthi, and the discourse starts when a young Brahmin, a Brahmin student named Subha, who's described as Todeya's son, comes to the Buddha and exchanges greetings with him. Okay, now I see what the source of the problem is. I'm sorry, it was muted. Okay, and so there's a little background story to this conversation that is related in the commentary. And as I say often about commentarial stories, sometimes have to take them with a little bit of grain of skepticism, but it's part of the tradition, so I relate it anyway. Also, the background story relates to the father of Subha, who was a Brahmin named Todeya. Excuse me, I'm laughing when I think of the story. Named Todeya. And Todeya was a chaplain of King Pasenadi of Kosala. And it's said that Todeya was very stingy, very miserly. And he didn't like to give any alms to monks or wanderers, mendicants, ascetics. He always had the belief that, a little bit like the common conservative line today, that what I earn is mine and there's no need to share it with anybody else. And so whenever monks, whether Buddhist monks or other wandering ascetics, would come to his house on alms round, he would chase them away and say things like, get a job, you shouldn't be sponges living off other people, you're just a bunch of parasites, worthless fellows doing nothing, contributing nothing to society. And so when he passed away, because he got a lot of unwholesome karma as a result of his miserliness and his narrow attitude. So it's said that he was born or reborn as a dog, and the dog was adopted by his son, Subha, And so Todeya became the dog living in the house of Suba. And Suba loved the dog very much. He had a very strong affection for the dog, and he provided the dog with delicious food. He had a rather luxurious bed made for the dog. And whenever ascetics, wanderers, monks would come to the house on alms round, the dog would bark at them. And so by barking, the dog would chase the ascetics away. And one time the Buddha came to Suba's house on alms round, and the dog started to bark at the Buddha. And Suba was standing, outside, seeing the dog barking at the Buddha. Then the Buddha said to the dog, "Be quiet, Todeya. You're going to die soon and be reborn in hell." This sounds a very shocking statement. Okay, so when Suba heard this, he was very angry at the Buddha, not at the dog. And so he came to the Buddha and said, "How dare you speak to my dog like that? How dare you insult my father, who is a very pious Brahmin, who must have been reborn in the Brahma world? How can you say that my father, Todeya, has been a dog, has been reborn as a dog?" So the Buddha said to Suba, he said, "When your father was alive, he buried some treasure in the garden that nobody else knows about. Tell the dog, if you want that treasure, tell the dog, please show me the treasure, lead me to the treasure that my father Todeya buried." Okay, so when Suba went back to his house, then he said to the dog, "Please show me the treasure that my father Todeya buried." Then the dog went running out to the garden and found a certain spot in the garden and started to claw it up. And then Suba came over and continued to dig into that ground, and lo and behold, there was a chest of treasure buried there. And so this convinced Suba that indeed that his father had been reborn as the dog. And so with this, the commentary says that Suba gained saddha, trust or faith in the Buddha, and because he understood that this came about through the workings of karma, so he wanted to understand more about the working of karma. And so he came to the Buddha and asked him a series of questions about karma. And so this is sort of the background to the sutta. So if you want to believe the commentarial story, you can believe it. If you want to see that this is just a little story that preachers had devised in order to stir up the interest of their audience, in order to get them to listen to the content of the sutta, then you could accept it in that way. Okay, but anyway, Suba comes to the Buddha and he asks a series of questions about the workings of karma. First, he asks a general question. So he says, "Master Gautama, what is the cause and condition why beings are seen to be inferior and superior?" The words used are hina and panita, low and high, inferior, superior. And then he gives more specifications. So he says, for people are seen to be short-lived and long-lived, sickly and healthy, ugly and beautiful, uninfluential and influential, or we could say powerless and powerful, poor and wealthy, low-born and high-born, stupid or foolish and wise. So what is the cause and condition for why human beings are seen to be inferior and superior? Okay, now first, the Buddha gives remember last week I made the distinction between the Udesa and Vibhanga. That is, Udesa is the summary or Sankitena Desana, it's short, compressed, concise teaching, and the Vitarena Desana, the elaborated teaching, the teaching in detail. So the Buddha answers the question with an Udesa, a short statement, a summary statement, a concise explanation. He says, beings are owners of their actions. And the word translated as actions here is kamma. They are heirs of their actions. Actually, the two statements that are really the key to the whole Udesa. So the word sakka means what is one's own, one's property, let's say. And dayada is one's inheritance. So beings have karma as their property or belongings, karma as their inheritance. Then the next is translated, they originate from their actions. This in Pali, it's kamma yoni. Yoni actually means, one of the meanings is the womb. So beings have karma as the womb out of which they emerge. They are bound to their actions, or this is kamma bandhu, which could also be translated, they have karma as their relatives, as their kinsmen, because just as kinsmen are closely related, when you have a brother, sister, cousin, so there's some bond or connection between you and your relative. And so when we do actions, when we create karma, that karma always remains connected to us, just like it's our own relative. And then they have actions as their refuge. Here the word used is pati sarana. Of course, the word patisarana, it's related to the word sarana, which is the refuge, like we go for refuge. We take Buddhang saranang gacchami. I take refuge in the Buddha. So patisaranang is a refuge, that on which one relies, that to which one takes recourse. And so first the Buddha makes this general statement, and then he relates the statement to the question of subha. He says it is action or karma that distinguishes beings as inferior and superior. Okay, so subha, he wanted a detailed explanation to his questions. Why are beings seen to be long-lived and short-lived, sickly and healthy, and so on? And yet the Buddha just gave a very concise statement. And so Subha says that I do not understand in detail the meaning of Master Gautama's statement. And then it says, which he spoke in brief. This is Sankitena, a brief statement. It would be good if Master Gautama would teach me the Dhamma so that I might understand in detail. This is vitarena, in the elaborate form, the meaning of Master Gautama's statement. Okay, so then the Buddha tells him to listen carefully, and now the Buddha is going to explain in detail how it is that karma distinguishes beings into the different classes as inferior and superior. And before I come to the Buddha's explanation, first we have to look a little bit into the meaning of the word karma. Okay, the word karma itself comes from the verb karoti. So the verb karoti means to do, to act, to make. And so from this we get in Pali kamma, which is equivalent, the same as the Sanskrit word karma. And the word karma had been used even before the time of the Buddha with different senses, sometimes just in the general sense of any action or deed. The Brahmins had used it in reference to the specific rites and rituals derived from the Vedas. But the Buddha gave a very particular, very specific meaning to the word karma. The Buddha said, there's a famous statement in the Anguttara Nikāya, Chaitanahang bhikkhave kammang vadami. And here the key word is chaitana. Chaitana means volition. And so the Buddha says that it is volition that I call karma. And this means that for the Buddha, the key factor in the creation of karma is the quality of the volition. Volition is the will or the intention or mental determination behind the action. And so the way the Buddha sees it, all actions, bodily actions, verbal actions, mental actions, originate from, in order to be karmically significant, all actions originate from and express volition. If there is no volition, then no karma is created. For example, if I'm walking down the path and I step on ants, I have no intention, I don't know that they are there, I don't see them, but as a result of my step, they die. I'm not creating the karma of killing. If in my sleep there's a mosquito on my back and I turn over and I crush the mosquito, I'm not aware of it, no intention of killing it, no karma is created. I see an umbrella and I think it's mine and I take the umbrella. I have no intention of taking somebody else's umbrella, so it's not an act of stealing. And this might seem obvious to us, but in the Buddha's time, this interpretation of karma was almost directly opposed to the view of the rival school, which was the school of the Jains. The Jains held that any kind of action, whether intentional or not, creates karma. And so for the Jains, if one accidentally steps on ants, accidentally breathes in an insect and it dies, one is creating unwholesome karma. And so that's why for the Jains, the kind of ideal was to completely abstain from action. And so even today, the Jain ascetics in India always wear, sometimes if you've seen photographs of them, they will wear a face mask over them, or a cloth over the mouth to prevent them from breathing in any kind of invisible living beings, because they believe that if they breathe in invisible beings, microscopic beings, and those beings die, that they're creating karma. Okay, so the Buddha identified sort of the key factor in karma as volition. But he didn't hold that just volition on itself, by itself, necessarily creates karma. But the karma, or the action that stems from volition, will be expressed in three ways. Through body, speech, and purely mental karma. Karma that remains just as thoughts, plans, emotions, ideas in the mind, but doesn't come to expression through bodily action or verbal action. Okay, and then having distinguished karma through the three channels or three doors, then the Buddha makes a distinction, another way of distinguishing karma, and that is according to its ethical quality. And so here the primary distinction in karma is between unwholesome karma and wholesome karma. Unwholesome karma is action which creates suffering and hardship it could be for oneself or for others or for both. And wholesome karma is karma which leads to the well-being of oneself, the well-being of others, the well-being of both. And what distinguishes karma as wholesome or unwholesome? Of course, we have behind both unwholesome and wholesome karma, we have Chaitanya, volition. But what distinguishes the volition as being unwholesome or wholesome? Anybody know?
The intent?
Well, the intention is virtually the same as volition.
Is it the view?
Not exactly.
Expectation.
Perception?
Expectation.
No.
Craving or aversion?
Very close.
Perception, huh?
No, he was very close with craving and aversion, but usually we have a group of 3 factors. We call them the roots. Yeah, so action stems from roots. From the unwholesome comes from the unwholesome roots, which are greed, aversion, and delusion. And the wholesome karma comes from the wholesome roots, which in the negative are expressed as non-greed, non-aversion, non-delusion, but more positively we could say non-greed is seen in acts of generosity as well as renunciation, non-hatred in kindness, loving kindness, compassion, and non-delusion in wisdom, insight, wise understanding. Okay, so this gives us a kind of broad overview about what is meant by karma. Okay, so now the Buddha is going to take specific types of karma and show what kind of results flow from that karma and how the different types of karma distinguish beings in terms of different results. So he takes the case, here we're in paragraph 5. So here, student, some man or woman kills living beings and is murderous, bloody-handed, given to blows and violence, merciless to living beings. So this is a more elaborate explanation of the simple statement that somebody is one who habitually and regularly takes life, doing so with a mind of cruelty. Okay, because of performing and undertaking such action on the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears or is reborn in a state of deprivation. What's called a state of deprivation means a bad destiny, a lower realm of rebirth. In an unhappy destination, in perdition, or the lower world, even in hell. But then the text continues, but if on the dissolution of the body after death, he is not reborn in a state of deprivation in the lower world, but instead comes back to the human state, then wherever he is reborn, he is short-lived. He has a short lifespan. This is the way, student, that leads to short lifespan. Namely, one kills living beings and is murderous, bloody-handed, and so forth. Okay, now to understand this passage, we have to understand different ways in which karma functions. And the text distinguishes in terms of function 4 functions of karma. And the 4 functions are explained, I don't want people to get confused, but they're explained differently from an Abhidhamma point of view and from a sutta point of view. So here I'm going to, because last year I gave, in the Abhidhamma retreat, I gave the explanation from the Abhidhamma point of view. Now I'm giving the explanation from the sutta point of view. So the 4 functions are okay, productive means this is the function by which the karma produces the rebirth. So rebirth into different realms and into different conditions, even within the human realm, comes from a particular karma. And that karma, in bringing about the mode of rebirth, is said to be exercising the productive function. So each of us has been reborn as a human being because of a particular karma, and that karma, by bringing us into the human realm, has been exercising or performing the productive function. Okay, the oppressive function is the function that a karma will exercise during the course of a lifetime. And the oppressive function would be that the karma is not producing the rebirth itself, but during the course of life, the karma produces a lot of problems and difficulties. For example, the karma will produce, if somebody is a businessman and they undertake business, they meet with constant failures, problems, trouble, losses, poor investments, crashes in their enterprises. Somebody is a farmer, there will be poor crops, droughts, floods, loss of income. Or somebody can be sickly, have a lot of health problems in the course of life. Okay, so this will be the oppressive function of karma. The supportive function is it's just the opposite of that. The supportive function of karma, this is the role of karma in bringing about extra beneficial results in the course of the lifetime. So, some people go into business, they hardly do any, I don't know if it works this way, but some people, maybe they don't make special effort, but suddenly everything works to their advantage. Maybe 30, 40 years ago, there were a group of guys who were building a little computer in a garage, and suddenly it takes off, and one of them becomes Steve Jobs, right? One who the little computer turns into the Apple computer, and then everything takes off. And how does he? Probably there were 50 to 100 guys building computers in their garages. So why is it that one particular guy or a couple of guys, their project takes off and becomes a great success, whereas I remember years ago we had WordStar, and we had, I remember when I was in Sri Lanka in the 1980s, we had so many different computers and so many different operating systems, like all of them have just faded into oblivion, and just a few computers, just computer systems have taken off and dominated the whole market. We have, like maybe 1960s in Great Britain, there were a whole bunch of these little musical groups, rock groups, experimenting with new style of music. And suddenly, like, all of the attention focuses on one or two particular groups, and sort of they take off into like superstar. Well, they are superstars, sort of like comets flying into the sky. And one of them becomes the Beatles, and they have that's like a comet that just flares. And within a few years, they're gone. 10 years, they're gone. Whereas another is still shooting through the sky. Tina, who is that?
The Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
Fantastic. 50th
Yes.
anniversary.
70 years old. Probably
More even.
more, yeah. But I remember when.
Some are my age. I think Mick's my age.
Yeah, so why do they take off? It must be some kind of, at least one factor is some really powerful karma. Okay, so this is supportive karma. And then the destructive karma is said to be a karma that comes out of nowhere, sort of, and at least we see it most clearly where it brings about a premature death. Like just the other day, Carolyn told me about this accident that took place at Goshen. Just some young people in a car taking driving lesson, and then another vehicle came from another direction out of nowhere, and 3 kids were killed. So, without an understanding of karma, it would just completely tear up my heart. But when one looks at this from the light of karma, we could say there must be some explanation behind it. And then sometimes when there's a crash like that, a few people will be killed, but somebody else, maybe a couple of people, will emerge intact, maybe with just little scratches and bruises, but they're able to come out and survive and to live the rest of their life.
So does the Buddha state that everything that happens to you is due to your previous intentional actions?
Okay, that's a good question, but I think let's go through the scheme here and then bring that question up. Okay, so now, according to the workings of the law of karma, an unwholesome karma, if it takes on the productive role, that is the role of generating rebirth, it has to generate a rebirth into the lower realms. That is, we have the lower realms. Okay, so the unwholesome karma will produce a rebirth into the lower realms, and the lower realms would be the hells, the animal realm, and the sphere of the pretas, sometimes it's translated as the hungry ghosts, but that's a little too specific. I like to use the afflicted spirits. And a wholesome karma, if it takes on the productive role in generating rebirth, it will bring rebirth into one of the good destinations, or the happy realms. That would be rebirth into the human realm, or into one of the divine or celestial heavenly realms. Okay, so in the passage which we have here, if on the dissolution of the body, we have, because of performing and undertaking such action, that is the killing, the taking of life, on the dissolution of the body after death, he is reborn in a state of deprivation. This is referring to the case where the karma of killing takes on the productive role. If that karma takes on the productive role, then it will produce rebirth. Since it's an unwholesome karma, it will produce rebirth into one of the lower realms. But it's possible that the person performs other wholesome karmas. And so, in fact, in the course of life, we all have like combinations of wholesome and unwholesome deeds. So if a person has a predominance, or at least a good proportion of wholesome karma, and so some wholesome karma takes on the role, the productive function, the role of generating rebirth, then the person, as a result of the wholesome karma, can be reborn in the good realms, one of the good realms, say, in the human realm. But even though he is reborn as a result of a wholesome karma, but the actions of taking life still remain stored up, say, in the deep levels of the mind, in the mental continuum. And so that karma can gain the opportunity to produce its results in the course of life, the course of the human existence. And then it can take on the oppressive function, creating all sorts of obstacles and hardships for the person. So that the person might get beaten up by others, abused and reviled by others, meet with problems in family life, business life, health problems. All of this, these are coming about because through the maturation of the unwholesome, or could be coming about because of the maturation of that unwholesome karma in its oppressive function. But it can also happen that that unwholesome karma takes on an even stronger function, and then it takes on the destructive function. So even though the person might be living a healthy, what seems to be a happy, healthy, successful life as a human being, but that destructive karma is hidden there in the background. And when the opportunity arises, boom, it matures and takes his life. So we have a relatively young man, a senator from Massachusetts, who, against all odds, in 1960, well, not against all odds, but in 1960, he gets elected President of the United States. the most powerful position in the world. He has a beautiful wife, 2 nice children, and people like him on the whole. And then he goes on a trip to Texas, and boom, 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 assassination. So we could say, looking at this through the lens of karma, this would be like a very strong, wholesome, productive karma, a lot of supportive karma coming in, but hiding in the background, destructive karma, getting the opportunity to mature. And then in the prime of life, what was he, about 45 years old, comes to an end. Okay, then let's just take the opposite of this now. And then I'll ask for questions. Now we take sort of the counterpart case. Okay, here some man or woman abandoning the killing of living beings abstains from killing living beings. With rod and weapon laid aside, gentle and kindly, he abides compassionate to all living beings. Okay, so this is somebody who deliberately, motivated by loving kindness and compassion, deliberately abstains from destroying life, makes the determination not to kill living beings. And though it might seem that abstaining from killing living beings is just a negation of an action, just desisting from the action of killing living beings, but actually that, in the case that's being depicted here, the act of abstaining or desisting from killing living beings comes about through an act of determination. It comes about through a deliberate intention not to kill living beings. And so that determination, I will not kill living beings, or that attitude of kindness and compassion, that I feel sympathy, empathy with living beings, so I won't harm them or kill them under any conditions, that determination generates a very powerful, wholesome or positive karma. And so that's why it says, because of performing and undertaking such action, even though the person might not meet with conditions where they're tempted to take life, but just that forming that determination, and within the Buddha's context is done repeatedly whenever one undertakes the precepts. So if every day one undertakes the precepts, panati pata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami, I undertake the precept or the training rule to abstain from taking life, then one is creating that powerful, wholesome karma of not killing living beings. And so that mental determination, that mental volition, is infusing or imbuing the mind with very positive, wholesome karmic force. And so because of performing and undertaking such action, creating that karma of not taking life, on the dissolution of the body after death, that being or person reappears in a happy destination. It is one of the fortunate realms of rebirth, either under good conditions in the human realm or in one of the celestial divine realms. This is taking the case where the person, as a result of performing that wholesome karma, is reborn in one of the heavenly realms. Because then comes the qualification. But if on the dissolution of the body after death, he does not reappear in a happy destination in the heavenly world, but instead comes back to the human state, then wherever he is reborn, he is long-lived. So this is the way that leads to long life, namely abandoning the killing of living beings, one abstains from killing living beings, and so on. So actually, what I would say is that the karma of abstaining from killing living beings, if it takes on, it can take on the productive function. If it takes on the productive function, then it will produce rebirth into the good realms, that is, the heavenly realm or the human realm. So the sutta is taking the preeminent case of the wholesome karma producing rebirth in the heavenly realm, and then it takes, in the secondary case, a rebirth in the human realm. But both of these are following from the productive function of the wholesome karma. It produces rebirth either in the heavenly realm, if it's powerful enough. If it's weaker, it produces a rebirth in the human realm. But that karma of abstaining from taking life can also be serving in the supportive role. So if it's functioning in the supportive role, then for a human being, apart from the human rebirth, it will also be producing all sorts of good results in the human realm, additional good results. So, especially abstaining from killing living beings, so one would be likely to have good health and to have a long lifespan as a human being. Okay, it's possible, though, that the productive karma produces rebirth as a human being, but then some other unwholesome karma, even karma of harming and killing living beings, takes on the oppressive role and then counteracts the good result implicit in the human rebirth. Wait, let me just finish, then I'll ask for questions. Okay, so this case where one comes back to the human state, and then when one is reborn with a long lifespan, so one could conjecture that that long lifespan is the result of the karma of abstaining from killing living beings. It's possible, I could conceive this, that because the person has abstained from killing living beings, they have a long lifespan, but maybe in still another existence, they oppressed and harmed living beings, so they've created oppressive karma, so they might have a long lifespan, but because of the oppressive karma, they've met a lot of illness in the course of their life. I could think of a few cases of people who had very long lifespan, but had a lot of illness in the course of their life. So perhaps that came from, two karmas working in two karmic accumulations working in different directions. The wholesome karma producing the long lifespan, the unwholesome karma causing repeated bouts of illness in the course of the lifespan. Okay, maybe at this point I'll ask for questions. Okay, I'll take Chris's question, but maybe first you ask your question, because Chris's is a big question. Yeah, I saw that. Sam has it there. What is your name? Yeah. John. Okay.
Just one confusion among many. Karma almost seems like a entity into itself. like there's something that propels it, but it's not self. So I'm just wondering, what is this entity that kind of binds it and pushes it forward? And then secondly, it seems like you're saying it's multi-determined, like it could be several lifetimes, impinging upon several different kinds of karma. What is that forms or propels it through?
Okay, these are big questions. Let's take them one at a time. Okay, first, is karma something like a thing in itself? I don't want to say karma is a thing in itself, but let us say that according to the Buddha, like one of the laws of sentient existence, of conscious existence in the universe, is the law of karma, according to which our volitions, our volitional actions, have this tendency to produce a result which corresponds to the ethical quality of the action, so that it's almost like a kind of action and reaction principle operating in the sphere not of physical matter, like the laws of physics, but operating in the sphere of willed, morally significant willed actions, so that the actions we perform will in some way, through the operation of this law, come back to us over the course of lifetimes, whether in this life or in future lives, and produce a result which reflects, corresponds to, mirrors the ethical quality of the original action. Where does karma, then you've mentioned that karma seems to imply some kind of self. Okay, now according to Buddhism, that there's no substantial self as a self-identical entity, a substantial entity, which remains from life to life. But there is a stream of consciousness, so that in the course of any life, this life right now, I don't have a substantial self, something bhante, with like a solid rock. But there's this consciousness which is always changing from moment to moment. But now, because of the causal continuity from one moment to the next, there is some kind of identity within that stream of consciousness. So the identity is established on the basis of the cause and effect relationship between different occasions of experience. We can say the conditionality between earlier moments of experience and the present moment of experience. Now, according to Buddhism, this continuity of consciousness doesn't come to an end with the death of the physical body, but the body functions as a support for the stream of consciousness. And when the body biologically is unable to support the stream of consciousness, the body falls away, it perishes, but the stream of consciousness then continues on. And the stream of consciousness, where it goes, how it's reborn, what happens to it, that is governed by karma. Where does the karma exist? In early Buddhism, that question doesn't come up and is not really answered. It's just kept as, the assumption is that once karma is created, it just remains as a potentiality to produce the result. And when it produces the result, then the karma will be exhausted. Then you have the second question. No, I've answered the first, but I forgot the second.
Just in response to that, it's like almost like fireworks, almost like an impersonal bombardment of all these actions.
Yeah.
That's what was the second question about. Is it? That's kind of confusing. It's almost like it's impersonal. It's non-self, but still it's almost like a impersonal.
You have to put the microphone there.
It's almost like a personal bombardment of actions. almost like a fireworks, it's continuously going off.
Yeah, I say the stream of consciousness is individualized, and so the working of karma is individualized. Though it's individualized, though without an underlying self. And so karma will produce, in the course of a person's experience, it will produce its fruits, its results. And then in response to those results, the person will act in other ways which will create new karma. And that karma will remain as a potentiality which will produce still further results. So there's a stream of karma and its results which continues in continuity, though without a permanent substantial self underlying it. Okay, Chris, you had your question.
So my question was, does everything that happens to us in our life, is everything that happens to us the result of our previous intentional actions?
Yeah, this is a good question. Does everything that happens to us happen to us as a result of karma, as the result of our intentional action? And this is a question where I have to say, I don't know. No, very frankly. And I don't see that if we base on the early Buddhist discourses that we could answer that definitely and say that everything that happens to us happens as a result of karma. In fact, there is a sutta that occurs in this Samyutta Nikāya. It's a little bit problematic sutta, where a wanderer comes to the Buddha and asks whether everything that happens as a result of karma. Then the Buddha denies that, and he gives as examples 8 causes of affliction that happen to people. And he says, it's generally accepted in the world, and you know for yourself, that people become ill as a result of, he uses the old Indian system of medical diagnosis, as a result of disorders of the bile, disorders of phlegm, disorders of wind, disorders of all 3 together, as a result of accidents, as a result of careless behavior. And then just the last one that he gives is that people fall ill as a result of karma, the maturation of karma. Now this seems, as I say, it seems a little problematic to me, because if somebody is repeatedly getting ill from, whether from bile, from phlegm, or from what seem to be accidents, we could, probably if one inquires into that, you could see that there's a karmic reason behind that illness. So the answer seems a little difficult to square with other things in the Buddha's teaching. But I still find it difficult to believe that everything that happens to us happens as a result of karma. I get bit by a mosquito and I get a little annoying pain that night. Is that the result of a karma? I'm walking down the street and a dog comes out and bites me. Is that the result of a karma? I'd only have to say it could be, it could not be, or it might not be. Then we come to really big problems. This is where I find some really difficulties. The Holocaust, which eliminates 6 million Jewish people in Central and Eastern Europe, the killing fields in Cambodia where 2 million people are killed. Can we say that all of this is happening because of karma? I just find this really problematic. But so when I think about karma, I think about it this way, not trying to reason from what is happening in the present back to the past and saying, this must be due to some bad karma, or this must be the result of some good karma. But rather I reason from the present going into, or reflect from the present going to the future, that if I commit unwholesome actions, then if those actions get to produce their results, they're going to bring suffering and hardship for me. And if I do good actions in the present, then when those actions mature, they're going to bring well-being and happiness. So for myself, that is sufficient as a guide. I don't have to start reflecting back from the present into the past. Dina.
Well, I have two questions.
Let us take the microphone.
Microphone. Thank you. Is there some kind of immediate karma? You smoke and you get, something happened, you decide you smoked unintentionally. You smoke cigarettes?
Yeah.
Remember when the doctor said camels were good for you?
More doctors smoke Camels than
More
any other
doctors
cigarette.
smoke camels than any other cigarette. So you think, well, I'll smoke some camels. Right?
Yeah.
And you get emphysema. Can karma happen right there on the spot is basically my question.
Yeah, okay, there is what is called Dita Dhammika karma. This is karma which produces its result in this lifetime. Yeah, so karma can produce its result in this lifetime. But I say that emphysema or lung cancer that result from smoking, that is not a karmic result. Or it's not the karmic result of smoking. It's a result purely at the physiological, biological level.
So not karma.
I say that is not a karmic result.
My second question really goes way, way back and is basic. But who determines delusion? What is delusion? If you may see it one way, I may see it another way. How is it really determined?
Okay, what is delusion? Delusion, okay, it's also...
I tried to look it up, but...
So in Buddhist terms, we would say that delusion is...
Lack of understanding.
Yeah, not seeing things as they really are, not understanding things as they are, or understanding things in a distorted way. So, at least on the basis of the Buddhist text, it would be included under delusion would be taking things to be permanent that are really impermanent, taking things to be sources of stable happiness that are not really sources of stable happiness, taking things to be a self, I, me, and mine that are not truly myself. So that's one level at which we could understand delusion.
Thank you.
So it's not, it's not determined by it's not determined by the Buddha in the sense that the Buddha creates a fixed definition of delusion, but from the standpoint of the Buddhist text, that's what's meant by delusion. Okay, Chris?
Going back to when we talk about the abandoning of killing living beings. I understand that you kill in this lifetime, let's say a farmer or a hunter kills in this lifetime, but then cuts that defilement off in this very life at the root. It determines it could be productive for their next lifetime, but if they abstain in that next lifetime, does it not produce going forward lifetimes after that? Does it determine?
Go over the question again. I want to make sure that I catch it.
If you cut off the defilement of killing in this very life.
You mean somebody has been a hunter earlier or a fisherman?
Yes.
Then he comes to the conclusion that this is wrong, morally unwholesome, and then he makes the determination to abstain from that. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay. And then the question is whether his previous actions will produce results in the future, in future lives.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, the thing is, like, once karmic actions are created, then they still have a capacity to produce results in the future. But if one engages, the relationships are very complex. So if one engages in a lot of wholesome action, it could actually completely obliterate that bad karma so that it doesn't produce its results. That might happen. Or what could happen is that it weakens the results, or it weakens the capacity of those unwholesome karmas to produce their results. So when they do produce their results, the result will be milder than it would be if one just continued along that kind of behavior. And so somebody who took living beings, who was killing living beings, creating unwholesome karma, which had a tendency to be short-lived, say. So in midlife, he changes his way of life, undertakes the precept or training rule to abstain from taking life. He feels regret, remorse over taking life. He generates, maybe practices loving meditations on loving kindness and compassion. So he's creating a lot of wholesome karma. So now maybe when, in a future life, when that karma of taking life was to produce its result, instead of having a short lifespan, maybe he'll get bitten by a dog, maybe need rabies shots, which are painful for 7 days, and then it's over, and then that karma is exhausted, maybe. But also there are some types of unwholesome karma which, it's said, retain their capacity forever until one gains final liberation. So the famous account of that in the discourses, or in the tradition, is that of Moggallana, who many, many aeons in the past had taken the lives of his parents. And then as a result of that, he was reborn in hell, but he still had a residue of that karma, which remained there, trailing him life after life. And from that time afterwards, he became a follower of past Buddha, and then was constantly cultivating the Dharma under many, many Buddhas, till during the time of Gautama, or Shakyamuni Buddha, he became the chief disciple of the Buddha. But that unwholesome karma was still there, and just in that his final lifespan after becoming an arhat, it gained the opportunity to ripen. And so he was assassinated. There was a gang of criminals who were sent to kill him, it said, and they assassinated him.
Thank you, Bhante.
Debbie, way in the back. Oh, you have a question.
I'm taking in regards to what Chris was asking, is everything karma. I heard once a monk say that there are like 4 or 5 determining or factors in that. 1, it's our past karma. 2, it would be the other person's karma and how they choose it comes to fruition. And then also the karma we are creating in this lifetime. So it's not just, it's past karma, everything is past karma.
Yeah.
That's ripening in our lives. It's also other factors, because if not, then everything is predestined.
Yeah, certainly karma is not predestination. And that, maybe what he meant is that there are other things that affect how or whether karma ripens.
Right.
Let me see if I could remember what they are.
You know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. There was a set of 5 factors. I don't remember what they all are, but there are, a whole multiplicity of factors which determine whether the karma is going to ripen, if it ripens, in what way it's going to ripen. Okay, Debbie, she has the pink. From here, it looks like a pink shirt in the back.
Bhante, I have so many questions and concerns about this. But I'm putting myself to one, which,
Okay.
having a little trouble, which is my concern that not only does this explanation of karma explain different stations in life, inferior, superior lives, but it also can be used, certainly, to justify
yeah.
oppression,
Yeah, yeah,
suffering,
yeah,
social and economic
yeah,
inequalities.
yeah,
I'm sure it has been used that way.
Yeah.
I'm no historian. I don't know
Yeah.
much about the East, but
Yeah.
certainly in the West,
yeah,
it comes down to,
Yeah.
it could certainly come down to blaming the victim and
Yeah.
for wealthy, powerful people to congratulate themselves.
I have to say that I agree with that 100%. Yeah. But I think one has to understand that this is the way I deal with it, that there is a certain lawfulness working that determines a certain lawfulness working that establishes a relationship between our karmic, our volitional actions and our destinations in life, our experiences in life, and that there is validity to that operation between the two. At the same time, I think one has to see that this does not provide a justification for what you call blaming the victim or for people in positions of privilege to congratulate themselves. But this is a problem, I think we'll see it more clearly with the rest of the sutta. Originally I thought that I could take this whole sutta in one day, but I see it's going to extend over till next week. And I think some of those problems will come up very clearly in some of the other stipulations that come later in the sutta, particularly in relation to what's called, because it's explained against the background of Indian society of the period, high birth and low birth, which brings your relations to the class or caste system. Yes, please. And please take the microphone. And your name again?
Christine.
Oh, Christine, okay.
So, this is, I would like a little help in making sure I know understanding the guidance that you've given me. So, my interpretation of this is, yes, there are the karma that you have, but then you also have, in this present life, understanding that the karma is coming into fruition, but then also understanding that you have the ability to make certain choices in your life, not to be like, well, I have cancer because that's my karma.
Yeah.
For example, like
Yeah.
smoking or whatever.
Yeah.
So for me, my interpretation is that you have cancer because you're smoking. So the chances are you getting cancer is much greater than somebody that isn't smoking.
Yeah,
who takes care of themselves. So it's taking accountability of your actions on what you do in this present lifetime. So it's not always the karma that's happening to you. It's still the choices that you make every single day and every intention that you have.
Yeah.
So to be that aware of, because for me, I'm processing a lot of information, and
Yeah.
to be that aware of every action has that reaction.
Yeah.
So, I guess it's a lot to always be in that openness and
Yeah.
that awareness,
Yeah.
and it takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Because for me, I'm trying to be as present as I could be every
Yeah.
day, every moment, and understanding that there is such greatness in just being
Yeah.
and being present.
Yeah.
To me, it's overwhelming in a very nice way.
Yeah.
It's very fulfilling.
Yeah.
So you feel that I am kind of on the visual of seeing truth.
The what?
The visual of seeing truth.
Yeah.
So, sometimes you wonder, am I really thinking clearly? But
Yeah.
what I was interpreting from the other one is that you're thinking clearly if you're able to see no fear, no hatred, no
Yeah.
greed,
Yeah.
none of those other bad defilements. And if you're in a wholesome
Yeah.
way of love and kindness and
Yeah.
giving,
Yeah.
then you're able to see clearly.
Yeah.
That's my interpretation of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What the implication of the karma doctrine, the way it's explained in relation to volition as the determining factor, is that one has to be mindful, aware of one's intentions in action, because it's the intentions that create the karma. And what comes to us in the present, the experiences we undergo sort of involuntarily, whether it's the result of our karma or not, that we can't know for sure, but we have to sort of respond to these consequences in a wholesome way. Okay, it's time for us to take a break now for the lunch. We could come back, we'll come back here, say 12:15, then we could have some further discussion. But as I mentioned, there's still the rest of the sutta that we'll take next week. I was worried that we were going to go through the sutta too quickly. I'll be finished after a half an hour. Okay, so we'll end with sharing the merits. So we share the merits with the Dhamma protecting devas, the nagas, the fierce spirits or bhutas, and with all beings, wishing them to be well, happy, free from harm and suffering. Okay, I think he's finished. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika punyanta anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika punyanta anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantam anumoditva chirang rakantu mam param. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe devanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhutanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Bhavagupadaya vichayetato etantare satakayupapanna Rupiya rupicha sanya sanino tukha pamuchantu pusantu nibutim. Okay, then we end with 3 half bows for Buddha. Let's see. Or it could be 11, but I think more it's either 20 or 21.
Bhante, I have a question about the difference between karma and causality, or if there is one. for instance, you mentioned the example of a mosquito.
Yeah.
And, maybe one could say, well, if you choose to be in a place where there are mosquitoes and then you leave your arm bare and there's a mosquito in your room, then, well, there it is. But is that describing karma or just causality, or is there a difference?
Let's say karma is one particular order of causality. Like there are different layers or different orders or dimensions of causality. So, if I throw a ball against the wall and the wall bounces off the wall, that is a kind of causality. It's not karma. Of course, in my throwing the ball, that's an act of volition. But the fact that the ball will bounce off the wall, that's not a karmic result. That is just an event that's due to the laws of physics. In fact, like the commentaries distinguish 5 orders of causality. One is called the order of pure physical causality. If rain falls on the top of a mountain, it's going to flow downwards. If the temperature gets hot, water will evaporate. So all of those are physical events, causal events, but they're not due to karma. A second order of causality call it the order of biological causality. So simple example, if you plant orange seeds, you'll get orange trees. If you plant apple seeds, you get apple trees. If they're more complex, if you have particular genetic makeup, and 2 people with different genetic makeups unite, then the child will inherit the genome of the 2 parents in some combination. So that's purely biological causality. Another is the order of purely psychological causality. Different psychological factors will cause different psychological states to arise. So that's an order of causality. It's not necessarily karmic. Then there's the level of what is called dharmata causality. This would be maybe the links of dependent origination, the connection between them, the fact that all conditioned things are impermanent, all conditioned things are bound up with dukkha, everything is not self. This is purely dharma causality. So karma causality is the order of causality according to which, as I said, our volitional actions come back to us in some way that reflects the moral nature of the volition behind the original action. So taking the case of somebody who goes into an area infested with mosquitoes and he gets bitten by mosquitoes, that's not necessarily the result of karma. Though it could be, this is looking at it from a micro level, that of course going into the mosquito-infested area exposes a person to mosquitoes, but one could say that, perhaps looking at it with a very sharp divine eye, one could say that the person getting bitten by so many mosquitoes, that is happening because of some unwholesome action he performed in a past life. Perhaps, it's still questionable to me whether every case like that could be explained on the basis of karma. But it could be that karma might be a factor in cases like that. I would say, well, the mosquito would be exercising a volitional action and choosing to bite the person.
May I ask one more question?
Yeah.
I sometimes have sort of problems with karma because it seems like it's so easy to fall into wrong view.
Yeah.
Because, of course, we know Venerable Ananda was admonished by the Buddha for saying he kind of understood karma well.
Well, that was dependent origination.
Oh, I'm sorry. But,
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I sort of conflate those things a little bit in my mind. But it seems like since karma is so hard to really understand if you're just a regular person.
Yeah.
And so easy to kind of point to things and say, oh, that's karma.
Yeah.
I guess my question is sort of how useful is it to try to parse out for oneself karma as opposed to just trying to do good things? But I don't really know how to phrase the question, but it seems like the act of thinking about karma or trying to understand karma is sort of unwholesome in the sense that it often results in clinging to wrong view.
Well, in fact, the Buddha, there's a little sutta in the Anguttara Nikāya where the Buddha says, he speaks about 4 things that can, if a person tries to figure them out conceptually, they'll drive a person mad. And one of them is the working of karma and its fruit. Right, so, I look at, or I would say that when thinking about karma, I would say we have to just think about it in a practical sense, not try to figure out all of the details of the workings of karma, or whether this event or that event is due to karma, but the points I explained, that understanding that karma is volition, our intentions, our volitions, which come from our choices, that we can understand that the choices we make can be unwholesome or wholesome, depending on what underlies them, the motives, whether greed, hate, delusion, or any of the associated defilements, or non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion, or any of the associated virtuous qualities. And then the Buddha has given, again and again, at least a template of a basic list of unwholesome karmas and wholesome karmas. So the unwholesome karmas, we have the 10 unwholesome deeds of killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, false speech, divisive speech, harsh speech, idle chatter, covetousness, ill will, and wrong view. And then we have the 10 wholesome karmas, opposite to that. And you find those Majjhima Nikāya number 41, well elaborated in Majjhima Nikāya number 41, and then number of suttas in the Anguttara Nikāya elaborate on them. So we can see that this is the basic scheme, and also actions that are similar to those in the basic scheme. We can understand unwholesome and what is wholesome. And that, for me, that's sufficient. If somebody wants to figure it all out, go ahead. I don't find that necessary.
Hey, Bhante, in regards to your previous comment, what is the sutta in the Anguttara Nikāya where he talks about the 4 things
The 4
things that
will drive a person mad?
Yeah. Do you know which one that is?
It's in the Book of Fours. Somehow the number 77 just pops into my mind. But I'm not saying that I remember that it's 77. It could be completely off, but just the number 77 pops up.
Okay, I'll try it. Thanks.
But it's called, I think I translated it as inconceivable things. So if you look in the index for inconceivable things, you'll find you can start with 77. Nobody has the Anguttara Nikāya with them? Oh, wow.
So, Bhante, I was wondering if you could even talk about the role of meditation and how it helps in, lessening the effect of karma, or, basically everybody struggles with how to lessen the effect of karma or create good karma. So how does meditation help in all that?
Okay, I mean, this is a very big topic. We could almost give like a seminar on the topic.
Okay.
But to put it concisely and briefly, first, meditation itself is a wholesome, very powerful, wholesome form of karma. Because what one is doing in meditation, if one is practicing properly, is working to diminish the impact of unwholesome mental qualities and to develop wholesome mental qualities. In fact, the Pali word that's usually rendered as meditation in English is bhavana, which means development or cultivation. And so one is, by practicing meditation, one is developing energy applied to the wholesome, one is strengthening mindfulness, concentration, insight, calming the mind. And at the time one is developing meditation, there's no greed. Of course, thoughts of greed, thoughts of hatred might arise, but one is not letting oneself be driven by them. But one is just observing them and then letting them go their way. And that's gradually, it's weakening the impact of greed, hatred, and delusion. And then, through the practice of meditation, one is learning to become more mindful. And so that makes one more sensitive to one's states of mind. So people ordinarily engage in all sorts of unwholesomeness because they're not aware. They're almost acting like automatons, just driven by this impulse comes, I act on it. That desire comes, I act on it. I get angry, I express it. But now through meditation, we're learning just, to see what's going on in the mind and to let the mental states just come, recognize them when they're present, and go their own way. And so that is weakening their impact, so they're not driving our behavior. And then as the wholesome states get cultivated repeatedly on occasion after occasion, then they come to replace the unwholesome. So that tendencies that we might have had like years ago, like I used to get really angry very easily. Sometimes even to the point where explosive anger. Now I hardly get angry at all. Don't test me. Did you find that sutta? 77! Wow! No, but I didn't make any attempt to think, what is that sutta, to come up with it must be this one. Just, she asked, he asked me, okay, the question, and then just that number came into my mind. What is that? A lottery number. I have. No, but let's see. Recently, somebody did ask a question relating to that sutta, not in the class. So it's not that it's suddenly miraculously. It could have been about a week ago. Somebody asked me a question about that sutta. And so that would explain why the number 77 was there. Though I didn't make an attempt to, memorize it. Excuse me? Law of coincidences. Okay, Debbie.
Yes, Bhante, I have a question about the use of the words inferior and superior human beings, and I'm wondering if this is in the sense of fortunate and unfortunate, or more suffering and less suffering.
Does it say inferior, superior human beings?
Yes.
I see. Why human beings are seen to be
inferior and superior. So if you could talk about that a little bit.
Well, this is, it's not saying that human beings are intrinsically inferior or superior, but let's say the conditions of human beings are inferior or superior, in that having a long lifespan, good health. See some of the others. I'm a little reluctant to say this, but being wealthy, being in a position of power or influence. Well, these are the things which really cause my mind, scratches in my mind. I mean, we're in the United States, where we have 40 or 50 people virtually controlling the electoral process. Is that because of their wholesome karma in the past? I don't know. Okay, so but these are considered like superior conditions. Then the inferior conditions would be having a short lifespan, poor health, being born into low-class families. This is, again, against the backdrop of the Indian class structure or caste structure. Being poor, being uninfluential, just like one vote rather than being able to influence elections with millions of dollars. Yeah, so that's the basis for the distinction.
I'm relieved to hear it's the conditions of the human beings and not the human beings themselves
Excuse
that
me?
are inferior. I'm relieved to learn it is the conditions of the human beings and not the human beings themselves that are seen as inferior or superior.
And Buddhism doesn't make these kind of blanket generalizations about human beings themselves. But they will say, the text will say that human beings have superior faculties and inferior faculties, which is relating to, call the context of spiritual development, like those who have cultivated over, many years, especially many lives. The Buddha says those are ones who are apropria, indriya, that the faculties are superior if they've developed their energy, mindfulness, concentration, wisdom over a long period, and those who have low energy, poor mindfulness, poor concentration, poor understanding, inferior faculties. But people can always, because of the law of impermanence and the principle of cultivation, one can always change through effort.
Bhante, I thought to be reborn into the heavenly world, one needs to cultivate meditation. But according to the sutra, it seems to me wholesome deeds, wholesome karma.
For rebirth in the heavenly world.
Yeah. Is meditation necessary?
In the Buddhist cosmology, the heavenly realms are divided into 3 layers, according to the 3 realms. So there are the sense sphere heavenly realms, the form realms, which are the Brahma world, and then there is the formless heavenly realms, the formless divine realms. Okay, to be reborn in the sense sphere heavenly world, meditation is not necessary, though if one develops meditation, then of course one is strengthening wholesome qualities, so that will facilitate one's ability to gain reborn in the heavenly worlds. But the essential conditions for rebirth in the sense sphere heavens would be the practice of generosity and morality. Though if one does develop meditation, particularly from a Buddhist framework, the devotional meditations, like the 3 recollection of the 3 jewels and the 4 celestial divine abodes, those will tend to lead to a heavenly rebirth, providing those meditations providing that they don't bring the full attainment of jhana. Okay, to get reborn in the form realm heavens, or the Brahma realms, one has to develop meditation. One has to develop samatha, tranquility meditation, the jhanas, because those divine realms are sort of the counterpart to the mental states that are experienced within the jhanas. So in order to sort of break through the barrier that separates the sense sphere from the form realm, one has to develop a kind of consciousness that is typical of life, the beings in the form realm. And that kind of consciousness is the samadhi of the jhanas. Okay, then beyond the form realm is the formless or immaterial realm, the 4 planes, base of infinite space, base of infinite consciousness, base of nothingness, base of neither perception nor non-perception. So in order to get reborn in those realms, one has to develop samadhi to the level of the formless jhanas, the formless absorptions. So it's those meditations which are actually creating the karma that leads to rebirth into those realms.
Monte, on that note, I don't think it's, I mean, how do you do good deeds without the meditation? Because it's not like we inherently know, do we? Or isn't there some kind of contemplation involved in that? And isn't that the meditation in and of itself? But
I think not necessarily. If one takes meditation to be like formally sitting and attending to a particular object, but people will practice generosity. They'll have, maybe through natural disposition, kind and compassionate temperament, and they'll do things which are beneficial to a lot of people, and just either naturally or through following a particular ethical code, they'll live a moral way of life. So there are many people, whether Buddhist, non-Buddhist, who observe, who are generous, kind, have kind dispositions, and lead moral way of life without formally sitting in meditation.
But what I meant was, like, karma is determined by our will, our volition.
Yeah.
So being mindful of the results of our, that is meditation.
Okay, I mean, if you extend the word meditation in that sense, then you could say that even practicing generosity or observing the precepts is a form of meditation. But I'm thinking of meditation in the sense of, closing off attention to sense objects and focusing the mind on a particular object of contemplation.
And this might be a bit broad for to ask today, but you mentioned dependent origination, and I was just wondering where in that does the karma, is it the karma in the beginning? How, or is it in each phase that karma is being generated?
You mean within the formula of dependent origination? Well, particularly the second factor of dependent origination, this is what's called sankharas. Sankhara is, I would render it, volitional activity. So it's the sankharas that are conditioned by ignorance that create the karma that generates consciousness, and that consciousness is the consciousness arisen through the fruition of the karma. But we'll explain if you come to the Abhidhamma retreat. I'm going to explain dependent origination. Maybe we move to Madison Square Garden this year.
I believe that we had a sutta not too long ago regarding that matter where the Buddha explains that by being kind, you can't actually be reborn in the heavenly world, but it's didn't explain by meditation. It just meant to be kind and this. I mean, of course, and giving, but it never explains that you have to meditate only. It explains in your daily life how you live.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, this is like most of the discourses which are dealing with rebirth in the heavenly realm, understood as the sense sphere heavens, just explain in terms of observing or practicing either giving and morality, or sometimes more elaborately following the 10 paths of wholesome karma. Usually the explanation doesn't bring in the deliberate practice of meditation, what we would call sitting meditation.
I was example more like Mother Teresa. I mean, I'm sure she didn't practice. I don't know, maybe she meditated, but she wasn't a Buddhist, of course. And I remember reading a book, and she stated that.
Reading who?
I read a book about a father from the Vatican who was really close to her. She sent letters to the Vatican father. And he stated that she mentioned that she questioned God. And if there's no God, there's no soul, there's no self. In other words, she was questioning that because since she was not practicing meditation, she was seeing the self. And I guess through that practice, she realized that there is no self, there's no God. So she started questioning those in those letters. So getting back to the point of charity and goodwill is that she did a lot of great things. Yet she didn't advance in a meditative state, or even found that there's no self. Yet, I'm sure she's going to be reborn in the heavenly, in heavenly realms. I think.
I think that's likely. But she must have been practicing some form of what they call contemplative prayer, which is really
samadhi, right?
We would call it a form of meditation. It's not praying, give me this, give me that, but it's just trying to establish a contact or communion with God. And so it's a form of, we would look at it as a form of meditation.
That is true. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, if there's one more, we'll take one more question.
So, just from my experiences, I'm very new to Buddhism. This is just my interpretation, that you can still be in a meditative state. You could be in a meditative state without being in meditation. You could still kind of be in that wholesome place even without just sitting and being still. Like I feel that I can be in that state for a good amount of time, and I'm blessed that I'm able to feel that. So since this is new to me, I'm questioning, like, is this normal? Is this not normal? Like, for me, I feel like in my every thought and my action, I do try and be loving and compassionate and be in a certain way.
Actually, as I said, what we call in English meditation is in Pali, Sanskrit, bhavana, which means development.
Yes.
So one can be developing the wholesome mind in any state.
Any state. Right.
Yeah. So if one uses the word meditation in that broad way, then one could be doing meditation in any activity.
Right, that's what I'm noticing.
Yeah, but often we use the word meditation in a narrower sense of taking a particular fixed object, sitting either cross-legged or sitting in a fixed position, taking a specific object, and then making the attempt to keep the mind focused on that object.
Okay. So I feel like I'm doing that even without sitting and meditating. I'm just naturally doing it, and I'm like, oh, okay, I could kind of relate to it because I'm doing it naturally. And I never understood why.
I think it's pretty hard to keep the mind focused on one object when one is engaged in the midst of activity.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But then what one is advised to do is to use, we call it mindfulness and clear comprehension, which means one is aware of what one is doing, that's mindfulness, and one knows what one is doing, why one is doing, how one is doing it, that's clear comprehension.
Right. Okay.
Okay, Jane? Yeah. Way in the back.
About meditation, does it make a difference if there are a lot of people in sitting and meditating at once? Does it make a difference in sort of the general feeling in the room, sort of the vibration level? if there are a lot of people meditating as against one?
There's nothing in the text about that, but my experience is that it creates a stronger vibrational atmosphere in the room.
That was my feeling too.
Yeah.
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 So thank you.
Yeah, but there seems to be that because at the level below the level of visibility, the people who are all together in the room sort of making the same effort to focus the mind, it changes the spiritual vibrations in the room.
It does. That was my very strong feeling the last time.
Yeah,
Last
I mean,
Saturday.
this sounds like 1960s hippie
It
terminology.
does. It does. I felt like my old hippie self.
But you got cool vibes, man. Yeah. Beautiful vibes, man. Excuse me? Okay. Vibhanga means analysis. Okay, so let us then end for the day. We could end with 3 half bows to the Buddha. And next week we'll come back and take the rest of the sutta, which might generate a little controversy. I think the Koch brothers like that part of the sutta. And